good afternoon, good evening, I don't know what it is now. We have an interesting session and an elite panel. I'm sure they're all experts who know the subject like the back of their hand, okay? And the theme now is energy and sustainability. Balancing act, energy security and sustainability in Asia's geopolitical landscape, okay? This is the issue. All of us know the strong positive correlation between economic growth and energy consumption. Primarily, energy fuels economic growth, and therefore energy consumption is inevitable in any economic activity. This is the first proposition we need to understand. The second point that I want to make, I'm just trying to set the context for our very elite panelists. The second one is the rampant use of traditional energy sources like, say, crude oil, natural gas, coal, etc., has had its own impact on our environment, has been polluting the atmosphere, as we all know, and therefore we need to move away from the polluting fossil fuels, as they are called. Now, very clearly, there is a great recognition that global warming and climate change is very real, and that, in my view, and I'm sure in the view of most people, is the greatest challenge, threat, and risk to mankind, and we need to address that. And lowering our carbon emission is perhaps the biggest challenge for all of us. We need to think through how do we do. Primarily because we need to balance economic growth and energy consumption and make sustained growth in energy consumption in a sustainable manner. That's the challenge. And therefore, we have now a very rapid movement toward renewables, whether it is solar, whether it is wind, whether it's biofuels, all that I think we are moving. The world is moving in that direction. Yet you cannot wish away fossil fuels. Crude oil is here to stay for at least a decade and more. Coal is here, at least in India, to stay here for 2 decades. That's my call. And therefore, we can't wish that away. But to what extent we can reduce the consumption of these polluting fossil fuels, and to what extent we can move rapidly towards renewable, that's a big challenge. And we are all discussing this in the context of Asia's geopolitical landscape. Asia accounts for 60% of the world's population. Asia accounts for 40% of the global GDP. And Asian economies are going to be growing rapidly in the coming years. And therefore, they need to be consuming. A lot of energy. And that consumption has to be in a very sustainable manner. And therefore, the challenge for all the Asian economies, the big ones and not so big ones, but the growing ones, is to balance very judiciously economic growth with low carbon emission technologies, etc., etc. But look at the situation on the ground. The political dispensation in different countries is very different as far as Asian economies are concerned, and they have varying natural endowments also. And therefore, their economic status is non-uniform in some way, but they're all developing, there's no doubt, but the economic status is non-uniform. That's the context in which we need to be discussing Asia's energy security in a very sustainable way, and Asia's energy security and sustainability. Are they in conflict? Are they complementary? How do we make them more complementary? How do we deliver maximum economic growth by maximizing or increasing energy consumption, but that consumption of energy products shall be environment friendly? I think that's a big challenge. And therefore, I just shared a couple of questions with our panelists a couple of days ago. The question is, how best can Asian nations cooperate in ensuring energy security and sustainability for the entire Asian continent? This is one question. Can we go one by one? I think, would you share your thoughts? How do we go forward?
I think that's a very vast subject.
Yes, I know it is. It is.
Collaborate. But I just want to maybe summarize this context in which I want to answer this question. I think sometimes we talk of fossil fuel being just one fuel. I think we need to distinguish different types of fossil fuels. One of the strategies for Baker Hughes, which is an energy technology company, is to focus on a very practical and a scalable and a realistic approach that helps us to meet our aspirations of lowering our emissions. And to that extent, I think we are heavily invested in propagating a transition fuel that some people believe is a transition fuel, other people believe it's going to be a destination fuel, which is lower emission compared to coal, which in most Asian nations constitutes about 65 to 80% of their primary energy needs. And that is gas. So I believe, and you will see this, that we'll talk a lot about renewable energy. Yes, it's a very aspirational framework in which we are working towards. We talk about renewable energy, batteries, electric vehicles. But I think the Asian nations, whichever framework we can come out with, a consistent framework across these nations that helps us to increase our gas consumption and displace coal. And why I say this is because the second thing is people speak about increase of per capita consumption of energy and emissions and pollution in the same breath. So we have to be very careful about what you're saying.
Yes.
I think we need more energy.
Yes.
We need less emissions.
Correct.
Now we believe that from a practical standpoint, if you displaced coal with gas, it is very clear, science says, for every MMBTU of energy consumed or produced by coal, we can halve that if we use the same MMBTU produced by gas.
Right.
So I think that's a very, very pragmatic approach for all Asian nations because there is a lot of LNG capacity available to facilitate a cooperative framework and give access to gas and LNG to displace biomass. I mean, 15% of India is actually using biomass to burn for cooking. That's a very unproductive way of spending your time, right? And it creates a lot of pollution. So I think if I were to say one thing where we could cooperate and we could create a very consistent framework is to discover more gas resources, utilize LNG, create the supply chain for LNG to improve accessibility and to reduce emissions.
Awesome. Thank you very much, sir. Your take on cooperation among the Asian nations to reduce polluting fossil fuels and to reduce emissions and move towards renewables.
You see, I will start, finding an answer to the issue that you raised by looking at energy transition trajectories that many countries in Asia, they are following. You see, now everyone is very conscious of energy security as well as sustainability. And therefore, all nations have committed, they have already defined an energy transition trajectory for themselves. Now, this trajectory will also include an element of, what is the stage of development of that country. And therefore, it will have an element of accessibility, affordability of energy to the people of the country and developmental needs of that country. So after having said that, then if you look at, let's say, some of the countries, let us start with India. India has, I will only talk about some salient things that India has. We have 300 sunny days. We have very high solar radiation intensity. And we have world's lowest solar tariffs. So we are in a unique position as far as solar is concerned. We have 7,600 kilometers of coastline. Again, it's a huge thing as far as wind is concerned. We have done very pioneering work in energy efficiency, which is also indirectly, a part of energy transition trajectory. There are many other salient things about India. We have also started with this new now solar panel manufacturing. But let us move on to some other country. Let's say China. China has the biggest renewable energy of the world. And the pace at which it is adding is also the highest. And it controls all your EV manufacturing. It controls today, it dominates all your battery. It dominates all your wind turbine. It dominates all your electrolyzers. It dominates all your mineral processing. Let us keep that in mind. If we look at Japan, Japan is, it has its own limitations. So what Japan is looking at, it is trying to do floating wind. It is trying to do offshore wind. And it is very aggressively looking for green hydrogen long-term contracts. Because, highly industrialized country of Asia, even, same is the case with South Korea. Because it's a highly industrialized nation, and how do they, as was mentioned, more than 60% is still coming from fossil fuel. But nobody is going to, keep looking at fossil fuel. And therefore, they have to find some other fuel, and they are looking at green hydrogen, and very aggressively they are trying to do that. If you look at Vietnam, Vietnam has, achieved tremendous success in rooftop solar. They have done more than 10 gigawatt of rooftop solar in 1 year during COVID. Look at, let's say, Indonesia. It has the highest geothermal because of its volcanoes. Look at Malaysia. It has highest production of nickel. Now it is battery grade nickel, and now battery manufacturing, that is all because it is the highest production of nickel. So like this, what I'm trying to say, that every country has its own trajectory. And it is dependent on many other factors also. And it is actually dependent on what is the market design. Electricity is a highly regulated area, and therefore, it is also government regulations and the regulators. Then there are other value chains. What is the transmission strengthening that these countries are doing? And very frankly, renewable energy means a lot of storage. And storage, we have miles to go. We don't know if it will be battery, or it will be pump storage, or it will be some other form. Why we are talking only about chemical energy storage? It can only be heat storage. We store the heat, and 5 hours later, when the demand peaks, we convert it into electricity. So like that, what I'm trying to say, that a regional strategy is actually a mix and match of this very checkered matrix that I have tried to put in front of you. And that is where any regional strategy will come from. That's my view.
All right. No, thank you very much. Thank you, Jiwesh ji, for these observations. Let's now go to Deepak. He is a wind energy expert. So, what are your thoughts on how do Asian nations cooperate? From what we heard until now, that each country is doing what it thinks is right for itself, correct? So you can probably tell us about Thailand and your general observations about what do we do as an Asian continent, how do we cooperate? Is there an opportunity to cooperate? Because the theme of today's session is the geopolitical landscape. And I don't have to mention the undercurrents of geopolitics within this region. What is your take? Yeah.
Look, absolutely, no one size fits all. Every country is in different phase of their energy transition. And it's going to depend on, the affordability, reliability, government policies, So with that, when we think about Asia, every country's got a unique natural resource. Indonesia is full of coal. India is full of sunshine and wind. You go to Japan, there's 200 gigawatt of nuclear installed there. So every country is in different phase. Now, every country wants to generate power at the same time want to decarbonize, right? That's the mission now. You can't just generate anymore. You have to make sure you're not adding to your carbon footprint and you're taking some of it out in the process, right? And that's how you get to net zero. In terms of, how do countries share? Of course, we touched upon supply chain, China dominating. In some form, yeah, we're lucky, close to home. In some sense, it's monopoly, supply chain risks. Could be any way it can be perceived, right? So what we think is, when you think about electricity, fuel, anything, it's all about transport. Can we have grid? Can one country supply power to another? We have an example. You look at Japan, Singapore, they are 2 to 4 hours ahead of India when the sun is shining brightly in India. Can you transfer some of that power through undersea cables? There are various projects like that happening where, people are talking about thousands of kilometers of undersea cable and generating in Australia and sending it to Singapore. So those are type of projects where you can have collaboration across countries. We talk about wind. Fortunately, every Asian country has a huge coastline. After China, India dominates that scene with having the 4th largest wind install base. That's only going to double in next 5 years with the pace that our government has. And part of it, when you look at just India, it's a very good example. We're very fortunate here in India that we have a nationally connected grid. One nation, one grid philosophy. That's how you're able to manage the loads. You could generate power in Tamil Nadu and consume it somewhere else through our nationally connected grid. But when you go in other countries, let's say Philippines or Indonesia, with the island structure, they do not have that luxury. The regional grids, they don't talk to each other. They're standalone. So you can't really have high renewable penetration without that grid infrastructure. So like I said, no one size fits all. We have to look where everybody is, and the technologies, whether it's conventional power or renewable power, have to work in tandem to get there. And the goal should be, to continue meeting the demand, generate, but as well as at the same time decarbonize.
Absolutely. Primarily because different countries, as I said earlier, have different political dispensations, different priorities, different natural endowments, etc. Indonesia, for example, they are into biofuels in a big way, burning palm oil in biodiesel. I think they are moving into B20. They are at the moment B10 or B15. Malaysia is doing the same thing. At the same time, when we look at renewable energy, we also need not just, we need material for energy infrastructure. Indonesia has a lot of nickel, but that's grade 2 nickel. Burma has a tin, that's again part of the energy infrastructure. I think, and will these countries be able to share and cooperate with other Asian nations? How do we bring all of them together and generate a political will, put it that way, amongst all the Asian nations to come and cooperate and work together? Can we have, is it a fantasy or is it realistic? Can we have in Asia a common minimum program moving towards renewable energy? Any thoughts? Would you?
I don't know if I'm qualified to comment on the geopolitics.
Yeah.
But I think one thing I would say that, when you're trying to do cross-border cooperation and, I think the Asian economies are anyway linked. You don't have to trade specifically in energy to have an indirect effect of energy generated in one part of the world through one resource to another. Having said that, there are already examples of how this is happening. And I think the one word I wanted to use was trade. We just need to find ways in which we can trade more equitably, and we can find deals to be done between countries and companies within different countries which makes sense from an economic and a commercial perspective. And I'll give you one of the things about hydrogen, as you said, hydrogen is not a fuel that you can transport easily. So a couple of companies in India, I think you may have heard that, which emerging, we talk a lot about energy generation, but our energy storage company, Greenco, has already signed long-term agreements with South Korea, Japan, and Singapore to supply ammonia from renewable energy being converted from their excess supply of energy storage into hydrogen, producing electrolyzers in India using technology from some of the Asian nations and exporting this to these three countries. So I think the key to having this kind of cooperation is trade. Second one is, I think, all of these aspirations are, have a very basic foundation on technology, because that's what makes it economic and scalable. And what I see is that, quite often we are more aligned to taking technologies from Western nations. We have a lot of cooperations with US and maybe Europe. Maybe not enough eastwards, because I think only in a few exceptional cases I have seen collaboration, significant and a meaningful collaboration on developing some of these energy technologies with some of the Eastern countries like Japan and maybe even China, but there can be other reasons for that. But I think that's where we can create a framework to make certain things possible.
Yeah.
Why I say this is, for example, I'll just take half a minute more.
Yeah.
Like, for example, for geothermal, I mean, there is a huge amount of engineering and technology experience in Indonesia, which could be translated into India. Of course, we are able to do that because we're a global company, but I think there are certain geological knowledge that could be translated and brought back to India. We are looking for geothermal in Ladakh, for instance. We can learn from Indonesia, just to give you one example. So I think trade and technology would be my take on how we can increase this.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you very much. Your thoughts? Yeah. Jiwesh, sir?
I think what he's saying is absolutely correct. The beginning will always be, any alliance, when we look at an alliance, there is the lens of winners and losers. And that is why a big alliance, normally, it is difficult to forge. And so the starting point is trade. Let's say I have a requirement, you have that particular thing. So we complement each other and we will have an agreement. So that is how this will also start. I mean, we have even electricity transmission lines and arrangements with Bangladesh, with Nepal, with Bhutan. I think Vietnam has with Cambodia. So like that, even within Asia, we have these transmission lines. And electricity is being traded between these countries. Now, how it picks up pace and how it becomes, and it caters to many countries. We have to understand the geopolitical situation. We have to look at what has happened with SAARC, what has happened with BIMSTEC, what has happened in many other efforts that, let's say, India made to have such an alliance. So keeping everything in mind, I will feel that the starting point is some mutual arrangements between 2-3 countries, and let us hope that it will grow. And renewable energy gives that. I will just mention one more point. You see, renewable energy also needs storage, because it is not available for even during the day, season. There are so many variations. And recently, Solar Energy Corporation of India, when they bid, they got 4.6 rupees per unit for storage as well as renewable, as well as solar. But the point is, the solar itself is very cheap. So if we can avoid storage and we jump the time zones, then it is a huge opportunity, and I'm sure countries are going to take it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Jiwesh. Deepak, your take on this?
You know, not to take too much time here, but like I said, there's the fellow panelists said, there's plenty that's available. What's interesting is we also must recognize most of the Asian countries are going through a huge growth phase. Every country is going to have its energy demand doubling, right? So you have your domestic agenda, as well as, you need to see how you can cooperate and help each other. So that's something also that the nations will have to manage. And that's where sharing resources, sharing, shifting time, building out, inter-country networks, more grid capacity, that's what's going to make this energy transition faster. And renewable energy is today, no doubt, already at parity or below parity in every nation, so it's a no-brainer for everybody. What we see is the growth is further demanding more renewable energy, especially from industrial, corporates. It's no longer about, I need a steel bar. People want green steel. People are conscious who's making their clothes, where's the power source. Initially, some people would remember the headlines would be, about labor used in textile industry. Now it's all about, hey, what's the carbon footprint and what's the source of electricity? So the world is getting dynamic, and energy transition is just not about power anymore, and it's about, all 360-degree sustainability.
Absolutely. I've written and spoken this line. All of us have to sail together smartly. Otherwise, all of us will sink together foolishly. I think that's what I. But there is one last question, because we are now coming to the end. Unfortunately, because there are a few more questions, but I don't think Meenal will allow us to breach the time. Is it a fantasy or is it realistic to expect setting up of an Asian energy grid? Or is it too much to expect? You allow individual countries to do what best they can in terms of decarbonization, energy transition, and how far, if there is going to be an Asian energy grid, how far it is into the future? Any of these? Okay, please, yeah.
My take is that it is far, far away. Because, we are also a group of nations, and we know what is the politics among the countries here. And therefore, in Asia, I will not, but on sub-regional basis, it exists and it is going to strengthen. There is no doubt. But if we are thinking of a whole of Asia, let's say majority of Asia in a grid, I think it is some distance away.
All right. Deepak, any thoughts? Asian energy grid.
I don't think it will happen overnight, but I think what we will see is pieces that will continue to grow wherever it makes economic sense. I think that's going to be faster versus political will.
Yeah. Yes. I must say Asian cooperation in this area of energy security and sustainability must stand on 4 pillars. Must stand on 4 pillars. Okay, yeah, that's what are these 4 pillars? Of course, they mentioned 2 pillars. One is trade, and you talked about investment. No, or technology. I see that it should stand on 4 pillars. One is trade, second is technology, third one is investment, and fourth one is research, joint research. After all, yesterday's research is today's science, and today's science is tomorrow's technology. And therefore, research is extremely important for joint trade amongst the nations, investments between nations, joint research, and of course, transfer of technology. I think these, in my view, should become the 4 guiding principles for cooperation. To what extent Asian nations will succeed in, to what extent they'll have political will to find success in this, ensuring energy security for Asia as a whole, along with sustainability? Well, time alone will tell. But I think each one of us is duty bound to take this message to as many people as possible in our country, in all the other countries, especially to policymakers. So thank you very much. I want to thank each one of my panelists. We're already 3 minutes, overshot the time by 3 minutes. Good luck. God bless you all. Thank you very much.